FSU got an important transfer this offseason from their biggest rival, and a few shots have already been fired back and forth by that transfer. Richie Leonard hit on another big one or two today. In his intro interview, Richie Leonard, an offensive line transfer from the Florida Gators, took a pretty telling shot at UF, his former program. But this wasn't even his first shot that way during his short time of being a Seminole. We'll talk about what he said yesterday, but first, when he got to UF, his announcement photo that Hayes Fawcett put out on Instagram ended up getting this commented pinned to the top. It was just the date, November 30th, the melting emoji, and the hand heart emoji. That was commented by Richie Leonard and obviously signifies one thing: the game that will happen between Florida and Florida State, his first time playing his old school. Now, obviously, that's a big game no matter what, but it is kind of neat to see that moments after it being announced that he was committing to the Seminoles and that he'd be transferring from the University of Florida, his thought was, I'm going to go beat the crap out of these guys when they come to Doak Campbell the last Saturday of November. You like to see that. You like to see him immediately firing a shot at your biggest rival seconds after becoming a Seminole. A few weeks later, someone tweeted a play of FSU's early sack on Max Brown in the rivalry game this year, which was ruled roughing the passer, incorrectly, I might add, so much so that officials ended up using that play to show what wasn't roughing the passer in their meetings later on in the year. But Leonard replied to it saying, I did what I was coached to do on this play, where a free blitzer comes through and takes out their quarterback. And he was essentially calling out UF's two coaches when he did that. Two offensive line coaches in a program that has some of the worst offensive line play and worst offensive line recruiting that exists at the Power 5 level, really in most of college football. And he certainly didn't mind taking a shot at that point either. Now, in today's interview, he was asked what stood out to him for FSU when he hit the portal. And here's what he had to say.
About like when you played against them, or just seeing that made you willing to take their calls when they reached out?
Yeah, just always having a lot of respect for those guys. The way they handled themselves when they played us, and the discipline that it seemed like they had as a team was something that it was hard not to notice playing against them. So I knew that entering the portal, it would be a viable option for me.
I've never heard a player say this. I've never heard a player say that he was interested in another team because of the way they carried themselves and the discipline that they had. But remember what team he's coming from. Remember what you saw out of that Gators team the last Saturday of November in 2023. You saw them have a personal foul for spitting on a Florida State player. You saw the late hit that caused a concussion on Tate Rodemaker. You saw how Florida State didn't react poorly to that bad personal foul call on the noles on the sack of Max Brown. That ended up costing Florida State 4 points because they ended up scoring a touchdown shortly after instead of just kicking the field goal after the long sack. And you saw the way that the two teams interacted. One with several late hit personal foul penalties, the other that kept their composure. The other that kept their composure in hostile territory, in opponent's territory, in a very tough place to play, the Swamp. Florida State didn't do that. Florida did, and that was one of the things that stuck out to him. One of the things that stuck out was the way that Florida State carried themselves, which is different than I've ever heard any player ever talk about. Obviously, there are massive issues going on at UF right now. We could certainly pile on for an entire video about that, and we may get a couple shots in here at the end. But more so than anything, just the way that the programs are being run right now is very clear and very apparent to guys that are looking to transfer. Most of their prominent players, Trevor Etienne, Princely Emmanuel, they ended up at other schools, and there's a reason why. It's kind of a clown show of what's going on over there at UF, and that stood out to Richie Leonard while he was playing in a rivalry game. Before I show you what else he said, let me give a little bit of love to my friends over at Got Spears. GotSpears.com still doing their Take 50. You can get $50 off most items over there. Now, you can't go order one of the really small items that's like $50 and get it for free. But most of your items, your big gator heads with the tomahawks in them, your 6-foot spear like we've shown you and like you've seen us have at different tailgates and events and parties, make sure that you are giving some love over there to gotspears.com. Use the code TAKE50. It goes through the end of the month, so you got about 2 weeks left to use it. If you're looking for that last-second Valentine's Day gift and you're in Tallahassee, go get you gotspears.com and go pick it up today. You can save on shipping if you pick it up. You can also order online and then pick it up at the spring game. Save on a little bit of shipping too if you are going to Tallahassee. I'll put all the information in the description. Appreciate John and his team over there for the support. Now, he also went in on UF strength and conditioning just a little bit today in the press conference when he was asked about tour of duty. Go ahead and listen to that clip as well.
Richie, can you talk about the offseason workouts so far, tour of duty, and what some of your physical goals are, going into the spring?
Yeah, tour duty is the real deal. We did something similar to that in our off season at my last school, but I feel like the intensity of it here is just on a whole nother level. Yeah.
You could even hear him kind of smirking, kind of laughing when he was asked about this. And I don't think this should be super surprising. Billy Napier just tried to replace their strength and conditioning coach. The guy that he had just wasn't cutting it. And so he replaced him with a guy that actually just left a couple of days ago for Boston College. And we're at the point now where BC is a better job than Florida is when you're looking at strength and conditioning coaches. But this is not a surprise. This is not the first player to say this. Princely Emmanuel, who ended up at Ole Miss, said that he didn't understand what their strength and conditioning coach was doing, said that they very much trained like a Pac-12 team and they weren't lifting weights. And Richie Leonard kind of tells you the same thing. Hey, they do something similar over there, but it just doesn't compare to what we're doing right now at Florida State during tour of duty. And it sounds like Florida is in some serious trouble because the guy that they thought they were getting to replace the problem has now bolted for a bottom-level ACC job in Boston College. Florida's in a world of trouble, and this really has nothing to do with Leonard, but I'll bring this up too. An article came out yesterday, and a quote was in it that I want you to see right there in the middle of the screen. It says, "We just don't have enough money to attract talent." That was from UF's NIL folks, Florida Victorious. Their marketing guy specifically talking about the troubles that their NIL efforts are facing right now. They did a big article. They've got a big campaign going on, and it seems like a lot of trouble for UF in just about every aspect that you could imagine, from NIL to strength and conditioning to not hiring an OC to having former players taking shots all over the place at your program. They're kind of a dumpster fire. They're the punching bag of the SEC certainly right now, and really for a lot of college football. Their win total comes in at 5.5. Richie and I talked about that on the live show just this last week. What once was a proud program is now kind of a laughingstock. All in all, tough times for UF, but I do love Richie Leonard, and I love his attitude. I love his mindset. I love that this rivalry is already personal for him. A lot of times in today's football, because of NIL, because of rivalries and more, the transfer portal, you don't necessarily have that fight, that hate for that other team like you see the guys of old have. People talk about it all the time. Oh, well, these players they don't hate their rivals like guys used to in the past. Richie Leonard seems to be one that maybe he does. Maybe he gets it. Maybe he understands a little bit more about this rivalry and kind of gets being on the good side of it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts. I don't know if you've been watching a ton of the new player interviews. This is our first video on any of them, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.